Let's begin by looking at the user interface of Edge. At first glance, Edge resembles some of the layout of Flash. There's the timeline, the object toolbar, the element and library panel, and a stage area for composing and previewing contents. The panel on the left is the property panel. This panel has provided a convenient way for users to control and add animation to static elements. To animate the element in Edge, all you have to do is select the element you want to animate with the Auto Keyframe button selected. You come to the property panel on the left. Select the keyframe dial of the property you want to change. This will create a keyframe that records the property you specified for the element at that point on the timeline. For example, I want the ice cream logo to be enlarged as the banner plays out. What you do is that you select the logo and make sure the playhead is at the beginning of the timeline. Then you come to the property panel, select the scale property, and change it to 0%. Because we want the logo to start small and enlarge as I play along. This will create a keyframe on the start of the timeline for the scale property. Then you move the playhead to the 2-second mark. This is the point where we want the logo to enlarge to about 110%. And I go back to the property panel and add another keyframe by adjusting the value of the property, in this case, the scale of the logo. The colored bar in the timeline represents the transition of the scale of the logo from point A to point B of the timeline. It is very simple and straightforward to add animation to elements in Edge. Users are not required to have much knowledge on how to run the program before starting to add animation to static element in Edge. The process involved for adding animation to static content in Edge is much simpler and efficient than in Flash. In Flash, you will need an understanding on how to operate the program before you can start animating. For example, users need to know how to convert the elements into appropriate symbols, and they have to understand the type of twinning that they need to use in order to achieve the required effect. If we look closely, there are buttons in the timeline and element panels called the Open Action buttons. These buttons allow users to add behavior to the elements. By having the Open Action buttons in the very top layer of the panels, they allow users to add behaviors to the element without the complicated process, such as adding action script that you would experience in Flash. This creates a more efficient workflow for users. In Flash, there are various tools and methods that can be utilized to create objects and add effects within the program to create an animation. However, there are limited tools in the preview version of Edge. Users can only build simple rectangles within the program. External programs such as Photoshop or Illustrator might have to be used in order to create more complex elements and export the files to one of the file formats that Edge recognizes. This creates a more complicated workflow, and users are required to understand and use the external programs to compile the elements before they import them into Edge. But please note, Edge is still in its testing stage. More tools and effect options might be available in the final release of the program. In comparison to Flash, Edge is a more intuitive program. The direct user interface is much simpler and efficient to use than the one we see in Flash. The process involved to generate animation is almost self-explanatory. Users are not required to have a great deal of prior knowledge before they can operate the program. And the workflow in Edge is very efficient for users to add quick animation to static elements. Although the current version of Edge is lacking the tools needed to create objects and add effects to the elements, this can be overcome by using external programs such as Photoshop and Illustrator. Edge would be a more comprehensive program if more tools are included in its final release.